Hello, everybody, and we are here today with another episode of Philosophy Friday. So,
Let's do this.
so today we're going to be talking about a potentially very sensitive topic that upsets a lot of people, especially if you have a different point of view. And that topic is work-life balance versus work-life integration. Speaking on this today, you have our usual host, myself, Joseph Kim, aka JJ Cool Kim, as well as Brett Novak, CEO of Liquid and Grit. Before we start, Brett, any thoughts in terms of our first 3 episodes, some of the feedback that we've been getting from folks? It does seem like a lot of people are interested in some of the PM content, but I know we're going to try a bunch of different things. But what have been your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of heat around the product stuff, so it's interesting.
Right.
It seems like there's a desire out there to learn more about product management, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the data stuff, I got some great comments about objective, real thoughts on that. So, I mean, that's what we're trying to bring, right? Like more objective opinion. We don't have as many strings attached to us, so we're allowed to speak a little bit more freely.
Yeah, it does seem people appreciate the form. I actually thought we were going to piss some people off in terms of whether it was the language or just how real we are on certain things. But at least maybe the haters just aren't reaching out, but the people who like it really do seem to like it in quiet. In DMs, they really like it.
We really appreciate the quiet haters. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So jumping right in, I think the first thing it would be good to talk about is exactly what is work-life balance, what is work-life integration, and I think as philosophers, I think it's good to explore some of the nuance because I actually don't think it's as obvious as people think. And so, what is that difference? And I think for me, the nuance when people talk about work-life balance is really about 3 things. The first is what most people associate work-life balance with, which is the amount of time that you spend, right? So, spending only as much time as you need to at work, maybe that sort of maximum of 40 hours at work, the time element is the first thing that people think about when they think about work-life balance. But in addition to that, I think the second thing that people also associate with work-life balance is the separation of your working life and your personal life. Meaning like in this regard, you really want to keep these things separate. And kind of associated with that, but maybe one step even further, is not only separating your work life and personal life, but even like the socialization or the amount of socialization between the people in an organization. It's like, are the people that I work with, do you treat them as your friends or do you treat them as, well, those are the people I work with. My friends are kind of separate. And so those are, in my opinion, the 3 specific things that when people talk about work-life balance, again, I think people think about the first thing, but then they'll also have some association of number 2 and number 3 as well. And then I also want to explain work-life integration. And this concept for me was a very powerful philosophy that I first heard about, gosh, it must have been like 10, 15 years ago. I forgot how long ago it was, but Phil Lieben, who was at the time the CEO of Evernote, gave this talk on his philosophy about work-life balance. And it struck me very powerfully. But let me actually read his quotes on this. Let me find it here. So according to Phil Lieben, he had stated about this concept that I don't believe in life-work balance. I don't think those are 2 things that you balance against each other. I believe in life's work. I believe that you work on something that's sufficiently epic, and that's what you want to spend your time on. I think there's lots of great entrepreneurs and founders that feel that way as well, and they want to work on their life's work. Those are the people I want to be around. And again, since having met Phil Lieben and hearing that philosophy from him, it's personally the approach I have adopted. And a couple of quick points from me before I throw it over to Brett, but I think in terms of work-life integration, I think it also depends on the difficulty of your mission. And from my perspective, I think that, one thing I tell folks at my company all the time is like, you can't really expect an extraordinary outcome with ordinary effort. And so for me, extraordinary outcome does require extraordinary effort, which means that we're going to have to like invest more in the company. It's not just going to be about, okay, 40 hours and then I'm out. It requires a bigger investment. And then speaking to the other couple of points with respect to work-life balance in terms of like the separation of work and life and socialization, to me, that's kind of a point of practicality in the sense that like if you're spending a lot of time with the people at work, it's just practically easier if they are your friends. And it kind of reminds me of another conversation I had. I met I think he's relatively famous. There's this guy named Joseph Kahn who was a music video director, movie director, and I somehow got invited to a dinner with him. And at that dinner, it was like all of his friends at this dinner, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, all these people work for me, but they're all my friends. My friends are the people that I work with. And that conversation kind of stuck with me because, for me, it was like, okay, you can have this kind of work environment where it's not just about work. This is also your social circle as well. And so, yeah, just wanted to kind of highlight my understanding of work-life balance versus work-life integration. And Brett, we've kind of talked about some of this stuff before, but not really. So I'm actually really curious to see what your take is on this stuff.
Yeah, well, before I go into that, I'd love to
Uh-huh.
hear specifically what does it mean for Joseph? Like, I
Well,
mean, I
for
know
me,
that's sort of like the philosophical side of it, but you've
yeah.
obviously implemented your view of work-life integration or work-life balance or whatever you've
Yeah.
done.
So
So,
so for me, it means that I'm committing a lot to the company I'm working at right now. It means a lot of hours. I actually I would be surprised if anyone in the games industry works more than me. I'm that hardcore.
whoa,
Yeah, I'm literally that hardcore.
whoa,
And
that was a serious mic drop right there. My goodness, it's a bold statement.
yeah, but I would say like not everyone in my company works as much as me, and I don't ask them to. For me, it really depends. Like, does HR have to work every day, every weekend till 2 a.m. in the morning every day? I don't think so, right? So it's situational, right? It's like so for me, it's like it depends on the person as well. So one of the things I ask people in the company are, where are you? Are you on a path to becoming the best and contributing to the company? Or even for yourself, just learning so that you're getting better, then you should be investing time. And the more junior you are, the more time you should be investing. So for me, that's what it means. Like there is that.
Right. Like what are the specifics? Like tell me the hours, tell me the routine, so I can kind of hold on to something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do work every day. I work, I'm usually up before 8, depending on what kind of meetings I have. I usually go to sleep around midnight or so. Although this last morning I
So
went to,
when are you
I slept
starting
at
work?
4. I usually start around 8.
Okay, so 8 to 12.
Yeah, something like that.
And then weekends are what?
But I would say during that 8 to 12, it's not like I work the whole time, right? I eat well, I don't eat breakfast, but I eat lunch. Sometimes I'll make time to go exercise. So I either exercise in my home gym. Sometimes I'll go out to a yoga class. So it's not like all work. And but I will say, but yeah, I work a lot. My co-founders also work a lot. And but again, not every person in the company works as much as we do.
And weekends are what?
A lot of our employees do work the weekends. I wouldn't say 100% on the weekends. Like I'm working most of the weekend, and I generally don't, if unless there's a good reason, like unless it's Christmas, I'm probably not going to take the holiday off. But yeah, it's hardcore, but we're trying to do
So
something
is that
difficult.
work life integration? That's what you would define as work life integration?
I mean, I think that's maybe an extreme version of it where, yeah, I don't think, I think you don't have to commit as much as I do to have work-life integration, right? So I think there's different degrees of it, but, it is pretty hardcore. And I don't think you necessarily like, one of the things I talked with Paul, my co-founder, is like, do we think we're going to have to keep up this level of intensity the whole time through, right? I mean, we hope not, because but here's the other thing too is like, and I don't know, have you read the book Atomic Habits? But part of why we do it is because we think of our work as get to, not have to. We get to do the things that we're working on, right? And we have a passion for what we do. Like what do I do in my, it's like it's kind of funny because people ask me like, I thought you were a YouTuber. I'm like, YouTuber? What are you talking about? They're like, you have a different job too. I'm like, I only put out a couple pieces of content a week. It's like, but that's what I do for fun, right? And so like, whereas somebody else might be spending 10 hours a week watching Netflix, I choose to spend my free time, whether it's studying about machine learning or learning about a new live ops tool or, creating like for me, this is my fun time spending time with you, Brett, talking about different aspects of the game industry.
I do
this is
enjoy
this is my fun
this.
time.
This is definitely this is fun time in my book too.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And to be clear, you have a family as well, just so the
So
listeners know.
that's the other thing I think that people do need to realize is that if you have this level of commitment, there is a cost, right? Like, you are going to have to spend some time away from your family. You won't be able to go like, my family's gone on a bunch of vacations without me because it's just like, well, if we wait for dad, we're never going to get to go. So they've done stuff like that. There is a cost, but I think you have to balance what is important to you, what's a priority to you at that time in your life. And I've had more time for my kids before this company. I hope to have more time for my kids when things are a little bit more stable. But for right now, right here, right now, it's the company and making it successful is a priority.
That's very impressive for sure. So, what was the question? Like, what is work life balance and what is work life integration? Is that
Yeah,
the
I
question I'm
thought
trying
we
to
would
answer?
we could open just by defining it, and so that's kind of how I defined it
Yeah,
in terms of the nuance, and then what is work life integration.
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna start with work life integration. I mean, I definitely am a person who believes that there is really no separation between work and life. I think that everything is connected,
Okay.
and I think that's more so as you start to have more and more equity in the business that you're working in. And I have 100% equity in my business. So I think it becomes very obvious to me that if I eat healthy, I work harder. And if I work out, I'm more productive. And if I'm more productive, I make more money. And if I make more money, then I'm happier. And if I'm happier, then my relationship with my wife is better. If my relationship with wife is better, then I can work harder. And so I generally just feel like everything, or I believe that everything is really connected. So I don't try to think about the two being really separated, right?
Yeah.
And work life balance, I generally more associate with people who have less equity in the business that they're working for, but that's not necessarily true. And they sort of separate the two. I mean, my wife works at a big consulting firm, and she definitely thinks about it as like these very two distinct things where she's working or she's not working, right? And generally those are associated with hours of work, and when you're done, or you're theoretically not these days, and how, and yeah, so that's, I guess that's the one difference probably that you and I have with our definition of work life integration is probably the social aspect. I mean,
Okay.
I have I have a lot of thoughts that we can hopefully get out about the integration with social and work. I think that in that regard, I just look at, I try to have as much of the intensity and the value that's created from working hard and a lot, while also weighing that with other priorities. And I
Yeah.
can get into specifics there,
And
but
there are dangers to that as well, right? Because if you like somebody, if they're your friend, can you give them the proper feedback? Can you fire them? Things like that. And so it is more difficult. But I think increasingly, my view is that I do think that the world will increasingly move towards work life integration as we become, a more global society, as we become more remote work in certain cases. Just home and work is just going to increasingly blend together. So I do think that's the direction of society as well. But
Yeah. I mean, I think overall that can be a good thing. I guess it just depends on how it's
right,
implemented, right?
yeah. And maybe one other point, just to kind of expound on something that you were talking about, which is that it sounded like you also watch for, I think sleep is important, although I don't get enough of it, but there's actually like an effectiveness to the hours that you work as well. And so I think that people shouldn't just associate long hours and super long hours or just getting something done at this specific time with work-life integration and like the other side of work-life balance. Like, I remember, so we have another rule too, which is called common sense rules, meaning for every rule that we have, if it just doesn't make common sense, then fuck it, right? And so I was supposed to get, for example, a
I love how
P&L.
how much fuck gets used in all of your rules and pamphlets.
Yeah, but like, I remember I was supposed to get this version of a P&L done one night, and there was all these just kind of fuck ups in the spreadsheet for some reason, like permission access things, and my mind was like totally hosed, and I was just like, you know what, this is not a good use of my time. I just went to sleep, woke up early the next morning, and then I fixed it in 20 minutes, and it was just like, oh, okay. But like, yeah, I just want to also just underscore the fact that sometimes people focus too much on just the hours and not the effectiveness of the hours, but people should also watch to make sure that in addition to the hours that they're using the time effectively and efficiently as well.
Yeah, that's a great point that I didn't highlight in my definition, which is I really separate work into two big buckets. There's deep thought work and, for lack of a better word, a shallow thought work.
Yeah.
And deep thought work is based off of the book Deep Work. And
Right.
it basically, the thesis of the book, which I buy into a lot, is that deep thought work is something that you need to really you have to be disciplined about to create. You have to have no distractions. You have to be able to concentrate for long periods of time. You have to be prepared for it. You have to be mentally, sound and be able to do it for, like I said, for long periods of times. Whereas shallow work, and it's very hard to do, right? And
Yeah.
that typically falls under the category of writing code, writing documents, writing specs, doing deep Excel analysis, writing out a strategy, thinking about a strategy. That work that generally creates flow, if you've read anything about flow. And the other type of work, shallow work, is generally responding to Slack or responding quickly to emails that aren't really strategic, or meetings, which I would be categorized shallow work. And so I really break those two things up, so much so that I have an iPad dedicated in front of me to literally a stopwatch that runs when I'm doing deep thought work. And what I find, and so I separate those two, and I try to hit a daily deep thought work goal.
Yeah.
And I don't, and I think as an owner, well, yeah. Anyway, so that's a big distinction that I have around the definition of work.
Right. So I thought the second topic that we could speak about really has to do with, in my opinion, I kind of have a problem with some of the work-life balance crowd, right? And so I wanted to go into that. And so like the big problem I have with what I call kind of like work-life balance maximalists is really like they're way over the top proselytization of their point of view. It's like, hey, in order for your company to be healthy, you have to have work-life balance. There is no other way. If you don't have work-life balance, your company is a piece of shit, right? And so, and it's like, what, like, what, and so
Yeah.
and so for me, it seems like, and not to get too political, we can talk about this other topic later, but it does seem like the world has shifted from a lot of people who've become these like massive virtue signalers to people who are now trying to become virtue programmers and trying to like program people. This is the only way. And so for me, it's like, and this is an analogy that I use a lot at my company and as well as on several talks I've given before, but I usually like to talk about different flavors of chocolate or of ice cream. And maybe I've already talked about this before, but like I view the world as having different flavors of ice cream. there's vanilla ice cream, mint chocolate chip, chocolate chip. And so for me, like I like work-life integration, and I believe that for what I'm doing right now, it requires extremely hard focus and hard commitment. And for the work-life balance people out there, I'm like, okay, you guys are vanilla ice cream. And there's some people that like vanilla, there's some people that like chocolate, but why do you need to ram your fucking vanilla ice cream down my goddamn motherfucking throat? It's like, Jesus Christ, like, let me choose what's right for me. And like, maybe I want to work hard. That's fine with for me. And what's right for you is right for you. But like, why do you have to like be so fucking crazy when it comes to work-life balance? The whole world does not have to have work-life balance. And there are people who are going to have a different point of view from you. And there are certain companies like Tesla, if Tesla believed in work-life balance, I mean, the world would be a worse place. So like, that's kind of how I view that issue, and just something I wish people would just be a little bit more open-minded about. What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of anger around the work-life balance. And I think one of the
Yeah.
negative things about it is that work is now being associated with something that's negative, right? Like
Yeah.
life is good and work is bad. And that's something that I definitely think is incorrect. I mean, I build a lot of things off of hypotheses in my business, and one of them is that work is good and that humans need and want to work to be fulfilled and happy if that work is good, right? Like good work is good and bad work is bad. It's kind of sounds stupid, but I think when you just bucket work as one, like work-life balance, and it just becomes this thing where work is bad. And I've always been raised that like, love what you do, and work is a good thing. And so we try to make sure people have autonomy, feel like they're challenged, and are valued at work and get paid accordingly.
Right.
And when you fulfill those things, people like to do it to a certain extent, right? Like if they're pushed. What I think is happening now is that we're just associating all work with being bad. And so then what we're doing is we're layering on top all these cheesy solutions or these band-aids, right? Like happy hours and ski trips and fucking swag and all that stuff to kind of like put chocolate syrup on really shitty ice cream. You know what I mean? It's like, I
Yeah.
get that there's different flavors, but it's like this one's, someone told me that olive oil was good on ice cream the other day. I mean, maybe that works. But totally. But my point is that it's like, don't be sugarcoating some crappy situation, And I
Right.
think that's that. And then, I mean, I think that I think what they're really also saying, yeah, that, and I think what they're really also saying is that they don't believe that they're getting compensated for the effort they're putting in, right? I mean, you're an owner for your business. So for you to work a lot, one, you enjoy it, and two, you're going to get the upside of it, right? And I think one of the things that happens with salaried work
Yeah.
is that you pay somebody $100,000, let's say, and you work them to as much as you want, right? And so at the end of the day, they're kind of making like $30, and they're making not very good hourly rates because they're working all the time. And that creates resentment. And then the resentment, I think, comes out in this work-life balance argument. But what they're really saying is like, if you're going to work me 100 hours, like I need to be paid at this hourly rate, right? Like I need to have, I need to have extra money.
But I also think that maybe some of the sensitivity also comes from the belief that work-life integration and the amount of work that other people are doing is going to be a threat to their lifestyle. And I just kind of remembered this conversation. So many years ago, I traveled to Fiji, and in Fiji, they're like the native Fijians, and then there's actually like this, there's a large Indian population there. And I remember at the time, I was eating in a restaurant, and there was a conversation about, a lot of the racial conflict between the natives and between the Indians working there. And so with one of the guys, I was like, why are you guys so angry at the Indian people? And they're like, well, they come here and they work so much, but we want to live how we want to live. We don't want to work like they do. Right. And so I think, and so as we're kind of talking right now, it just kind of reminded me of that conversation that I heard where maybe some of the work-life balance people, and again, I have massive respect for, if you want work-life balance, I wish that for you. And I have respect for people who want to, spend time with their family and things like that. There are a lot of times I wish I could do that too, but it may be that kind of feeling of, my lifestyle potentially being under attack if too many people start to do that as well. So,
Well, I mean, this is getting super geeky here, but if you haven't read The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism,
uh,
it's an amazing book. It's
okay.
it's one of sort of the founding books of sociology. It's written by Max Weber and spelled Weber, and it pronounced I think it's pronounced Weber.
Okay.
Uh, and basically, it talks about the Protestant ethics, that being the Protestant ethics, this belief that, well, I'm not gonna get super into the geekiness of it, but it's basically that Protestants believe that you're born to either go to heaven or hell. It's predetermined, right? And so Protestants, because of this, like Benjamin Franklin, had generally lived like very successful lives because they were trying to portray that they were going to heaven. Like, it must be obvious that Benjamin's going to heaven, Benjamin Franklin, because look at how many great things that he did. So they would work extremely hard. And when those people came to America, they really kind of shaped the cultural like definitions of work and became sort of the spirit of capitalism, was this like very strong, hard working ethic. And that really did create some turmoil because it, kind of, like you said, it pushed other people out because they were working so hard. And so it talks a lot about that being some of an issue. I mean, I think that is fine if, again, I think if people are actually working, and that's what I kind of came to. And I think that, I kind of came to like, well, are we actually, I'm fine with working hard. I feel like I'm a very hard worker myself. But I think as an owner, I really was able to look at like, well, what is the work that's going to create a lot of value and what is the work that's not? Because what I have a big problem with the work-life balance and the other definition, sort of just like the standard definition of work-life balance, is when they told me that they worked, I mean, my wife would always be like, well, I work 70 hours a week and you only work, 50 or whatever. I'm like, you know what? No one gives a shit if I work 70 or 50 hours a week, right? Like, I don't make money because of the hours I work. No one knows that number. So I think there's too much association with hours of work with actual value created. And so I really take a critical eye on like, well, what is work and what is valuable work? And so that's where I have problems with just sort of the work-life balance, or just like the definition of work as in terms of hours spent.
Right. And maybe, last week we talked about 0 to 1 versus 1 to n PMs. And I think it's also, it might be good to think about work-life balance versus work-life integration against that concept as well, because I do think there's a huge difference between a company that's trying to do something new, trying to create a new product, a new company. They have an existential crisis, and then, as an employee there, it's like, hey, we're going to run out of money next month. Well, it's 5 o'clock, guys. See you later. TGI Friday. It's like, it's just not a good fit. It's like, what kind of company are you working for? What is the this is like the situational context, right? And so for me, there are actually a number of startups who are like, we are going to create this company and we believe in work-life balance. That's what and for me, that's just such a strange, and I'm not going to call it the companies, but there are a lot of them. Guys, do you understand? You're trying to go from 0 to 1, and you guys are talking about work-life balance? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, what happens when shit gets hard? You're going to fucking go home? I don't think that works, right? So again, massive respect for people who like work-life balance, but I think that that's more appropriate in my opinion, and just my opinion. But for a company that's 1 to n, one of the things we have to realize is that we now have more companies of scale, right? Google is a good example. Amazon's a good example. There are a lot of people, whether you're at Facebook or Google, where, yeah, you can have work life. There's so much scale in the existing products. There's massive fucking scale. Does everybody there need to work? Probably not. I mean, work-life balance, people at some of those companies probably only need to work 3 or 4 good hours, probably. But when we're talking about building something new, it really requires a lot of massive effort, in my opinion. And, I mean, for people who follow Tesla or Elon Musk, I mean, he talks about this where, he talks about how if you work 80 hours, 120 hours a week versus another company where those employees work 40, I mean, you're going to be able to get double, triple done in the same time that they do. Now, you're kind of assuming that all the hours are as productive as the others, but that's, in my opinion, for that kind of company, a startup, something new, I just don't think work-life balance works. So my recommendation would be to really understand the situation that you're in and choose the right company for you. If you don't like work-life, or if you want work-life balance, maybe don't join a startup. And to the point you made earlier, Brett, about putting like fucking chocolate syrup on something that's not the right thing. I think the other thing that does happen, unfortunately, is like not every company is honest. And so like some HR teams, and even with my own HR team, they had some stuff. I'm like, no, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. Get rid of that bullshit. We don't do that. What the fuck's wrong with you? But like some HR teams may try to get people in the door where they're saying like, you can have X, Y, and Z. No, we believe in work-life balance, but they really don't. And they'll just say whatever it takes to get people in. But the actual work environment is a lot worse. I mean, we talked about this last week, Brett, where I actually try to, to really portray our company as it is, and maybe even a little bit harder in like some of the initial calls. And I even had a guy where I was so fucking hard, like he was ready to join. He had an offer. And then after that, the hard call with him, he just ghosted me. And I was like, all right, well, I apparently wasn't going to be a good fit anyway. So I'm glad we got rid of him. And he actually was a person who, for one of our written tests, probably scored the highest of anyone who's ever taken the test. But for us, it's like, well, he wouldn't have been a good fit regardless.
Yeah, and I think the issue lies in the sort of transparency or the clarity of what you're making and what you're signing up for, right? Because I mean, I think if you're an owner like we are, and you're going to benefit from this extra work, right? Then it doesn't feel like work as much, right? Like work doesn't feel like work for me nearly as much as it did when I worked for a company, right? And so, because I'm going to benefit from it, if I work an extra hour, I'm going to benefit so much from it. I think what happens and where the work-life balance and the work-life integration gets into trouble is when it's not clearly defined, right? Like a startup that is giving someone 0.05% of their company to somebody and then expecting them to contribute everything that they have to the company. I think there's misaligned. It's unfair agreement, right? Like that. I understand. It's like through a lot of life coaching, I've sort of we talked about this emotion being a supercomputer, and that what that's telling me is that this person is upset about the agreement, right? Because they feel like they're putting too much in and not getting enough value out of it, or not potentially enough future value for it. And I think that's the problem with some of the I want you to work really hard and other people saying, well, I want work-life balance. I just think that there needs to be more clarity, and that's why I like more of an hourly system with people who don't have equity, because there's so much less of that passive aggressive like struggle that gets created.
Yeah.
Because at Liquid and Grip, for example, like I'll tell people to review something that looks 100% perfect. Like I want you to review this report again, right? If that was a salaried employee, and we used to have a salaried person, or a set paid person, could be a set paid person, either a contractor says like, let's say they get $500 for editing the report. They're going to be kind of annoyed because in their mind, they're thinking, this is perfect. Why is Brett asking me to do this? I'm getting paid a lump sum. And I think that's what happens with salaried people, even if they make a lot of money, which is like, I'm making a lump sum. You're just asking me to work on Friday. Right. And in my mind, I didn't have to work on Friday. And
Yeah.
what helps with Liquid and the way that we've set it up, which I'm not saying that it has to be this way. There's different flavors of ice cream. Some wise man told me, but that is that you say, well, you're going to get paid. Like, you're going to get paid for that extra view. So for them, in their mind, they're thinking, well, fuck it. I mean, I'm probably not going to find any mistakes. It'll be the easiest money I make because it's perfect. And Brett wants me to review it. So I think, and that's why you have like extended hours with sort of, like more of a manual labor jobs and things like that, like where you like are budgeting this in. And the
Yeah.
problem with salary is that what I think companies are doing is they're kind of taking advantage of employees. So I'm going to defend them here, which is like, you get paid $100,000, and when you sign this contract, there was no hourly amount. It wasn't budgeted in, right? So
Yeah.
you probably thought 40, we thought 80, and now we're working you 70, and you're getting passive aggressive because of it. You're getting upset because in your mind you had thought 40, now you're doing 70. And I think that's where it comes down to, if I had to like kind of distill it,
Okay.
into like,
Yeah. So, Brett, I thought we were gonna argue a lot on this one. Is my perception. But so
yeah,
I actually agree with you. I do think that how do you compensate people fairly in a work-life integration scenario is a really, really hard fucking problem. And I think it is broken, especially in the games industry today, right? And so you see some of these companies like, whether there's some news out about like whether it's CD Projekt or whatever, and it's like there's this philosophy, and I've actually talked about it to the employees at my company, Lila. It's like there is a pretty prevalent philosophy in gaming that, hey, you guys need to work all your fucking hours, sacrifice everything, put in all the time. And guess what? If we succeed, thank you for making me rich. It's like this really like master slave fucking mentality. And it's bullshit. Or like, hey, guys, thank you so much for all your hard work. Enjoy your iPads. And then the CEO gets like $10 million. It's like, what kind of
yeah,
bullshit is that? You know what I'm saying? But I will say that, like, I mean, certainly I think for founders or people who contribute more or who have taken more risks, they certainly deserve more upside. But at the same time, like, if people put in the work, if they add value, they need to be compensated fairly. And I do think that right now in the games industry, that is a problem. At the same time, I also think that, there are ways of making it fair. There's ways of giving more equity to employees. There's ways of just suggesting to employees, hey, look, we'll either overpay you a little bit in salary, or you tell me if you want to take more risk, take a lower salary and we'll give you a lot more equity. Like, you choose, right? And we provide that option to all of our employees as well. So I
yeah.
think,
Let me jump in here for a
yeah,
sec,
go
actually,
ahead.
because I think this is a really interesting point and a big opportunity for companies in general in America. Again, I can only speak kind of to America because I only know the rules of it. But I think that salary is an area of innovation that has not been explored enough in companies, right? Like, I mean, there's equity, there's bonus, and there's salary, pretty much, right? For tech workers, let's just say.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like, but if you think about just all the different things that we could do with pay, that those are the only three mechanisms we've all thought of, right? Like, we have a system, for example, where if you're an hourly person and you do if you're let's say an analyst and you do a senior analyst level thing, you get paid 1.25x for that work. So when I get my invoice from them, they'll have their X hours and their 1.25x hours, and then they're incentivized to do more of that senior level work because they make more money. And I'm fine with it because I want them to be seniors. Like, I want them to level up, right? And similarly for companies that are going to go in and out of this like emergency time period, right? Or they're going to have like a rush week, or they want something done immediately. Figure out a fucking payment schedule or a payment system that allows you to compensate for this extra effort that people will put in. Don't just go, you make $100,000 and some weeks you're going to work 100 hours and some weeks you're going to work 50. Like, that's just too simple. So I just think that there's really interesting and creative ways that we can make this
Yeah.
less of an issue and say, like, hey, this weekend we're all working. You guys are making like $80 an hour on your, extra work weeks, and other work weeks you're not going to make it, and like you're going to see in your paycheck,
Yeah.
like
I think the other thing too, and so for me personally, I feel like I have been unfairly compensated for driving pretty massive outcomes at companies I've worked for in the past. But at the same time, I'm actually not mad about it because for me personally, I also think about, well, what did I gain from that experience? And so I do think that something that people don't think about enough is, you know, not only your personal compensation, whether it's salary or stock, whatever, but also what are you taking away from experience and learning perspective? And that's one area where, as a for our company as a learning organization, we do invest in our people. So as an example, there's a new person who joined our company and was not quite at the level. Well, and it's my fault. I fucked up for not evaluating this person well enough. But it turns out they weren't as experienced as I had thought, and so I literally took him off everything. I was like, okay, you know what? All your work, fuck it, you're off. You need to get your modeling skills up to par. So all you're going to do is you're going to take these Excel courses until you get better. Now, look, does that help the company? Absolutely fucking not. But it helps him develop his skill. And what I tell these guys is, look, guys, 6 months at this company, you're going to learn more than 6 years at another company. And I know because I've interviewed some of these, I talked about it before. I've interviewed some of these other guys at these, I'm not going to name the companies, but supposedly great game companies, and they fucking suck. So, you know what I mean?
good
Like,
restraint, good restraint.
we got to keep it real here, man. Let's keep it real. You
That's not, I
can,
mean,
if you
I
choose
think
the
you
wrong,
make the
we
point
talked
without
about it
naming
last
names.
week. We talked about it last
Yeah.
week. If you choose the wrong company, think about the cost to yourself in terms of learning, career development, all that kind of, there is a fucking cost. And so like, but I would say in terms of comp, I think people should also consider what they're able to take away from a learning perspective as well.
Right, and if you're gaining experience and all this other stuff, then great. Then you're again willing to probably work, work extra hours. And I think that as
Yeah.
a manager or a business owner or whatever, you have to have the pulse on the individuals and really use your emotional brain and figure out if they're happy with their compensation situation or happy with their situation. And it's not just money, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
have a lot of people, for example, that will ask them to work more and they say no. I want to have I want to have 1 week off a month. That's fine with us too, right? That's another way of compensating people. Or I want to work in Spain. Okay, that's fine. It's another way to compensate people. I also think in that regard, we don't think enough of non-financial compensation options, which are also very valuable for companies, like we've thought of. Remote work, flexibility. These things cost us not a lot, and we can find people who value that, and because of that, we don't just give them cash. So I think that's I think that's a really big opportunity and something that you need to solve. Like if people are like saying these things, you need to find the root cause of it, right? If they're screaming, "We want work-life balance," like do the 5 whys, get in there and talk to them and really understand. Because I bet you it's like there's something under there, right? There's something that's really bothering them. And there's probably a mutual beneficial agreement that you can create that's going to make them feel happy and the business feel happy at the same time. I think the thing that we do probably disagree on, JK, and
Mhm.
I think I want to caveat this with I'm in a
Okay.
little different position. I just did my 6 year anniversary talk, and you're in year one, right? Or
Yeah.
two? One, right? You asked
Well,
Paul, I think it was his 1 year anniversary, but it's like one or
officially
two.
one, but yeah, we've been at it for a
Yeah,
little
okay.
longer.
Yeah, so when I was first year of Liquid and Grit, I had a full-time job and did Liquid and Grit on the side, right? So I was slamming 2 to 3 espresso shots at around 8 o'clock at night with ice cream in it, right? And now I'm not. So there's a little bit
Yeah.
different time period. So there's something to be said about that. But I will say the thing that we may disagree with is how everyone fucking goes around saying they work 100 hours or whatever, and when it really comes down to it, they're not doing a lot of deep thought work. They're doing a lot of what I call shallow thought work. And in general, I think a lot of that is bullshit work because, and this is where I've struggled with defining how hard I work or whatever. I was mentioning maybe this to you, but I wrote it down. Stephen King, I was one of the most prolific writers in the history of the world. I think he launched, I looked it up, it was like 68 or 64 novels and a bunch of 200 short stories. He would only write 3 hours a day, right? And he would do it every single day, granted, but he would only do 3 hours. Now, if you're telling me that if you work 10 hours a day, right? And you're bucketing in the same amount, same definition as Stephen King, which is just grinding out writing. If you've ever written anything, writing is extremely difficult. Then that means that if you were as talented as Stephen King, you would have the output 3 times as much as Stephen King, right? So what you're arguing to me is that you are more prolific than Stephen King. You would be the most prolific writer in the entire history of mankind if you were a writer, right? And that is where I call bullshit on this like work-life integration thing, because it's
Yeah.
like, dude, anybody can fucking go on meetings like hours
Yeah.
and
So
hours and do a
yeah,
lot
so
of
maybe I could.
stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
So
So
that's the one thing that I think we do kind of
okay.
like, where I kind of struggle with the work-life integration definition that you have versus what I generally think of it.
Yeah. So I guess my response to you is that I am more prolific than Steve. Here's what I think. So what I
Yes,
think.
the answer is yes. Joseph Kim would be the greatest.
So what I think is that it depends. There's certain kinds of work that you can't brute force, right? So creative work, very complex, deep thought stuff. It requires like that kind of stuff. I think there were actually psychological studies done where more complex tasks required more deep thought, taking it slow. You can't just crank that out all day long. So in Ryan Holiday, similar, I think, and a few other writers are known to only write for, let's say, 4 hours a day or something like that, right? And I think for some types of those creative types of works, you can't push it that much. But I would say like for a startup, when you're just starting, there's just so much stuff. Like I have, I have 10 producer tests I need to grade today. I have like, not only that, but I have like investor stuff, presentation stuff I need to do. And not only that, there's just so many tasks that I wish I could say it was all like really interesting, deep thought, creative stuff. It's not. A lot of it's just like, well, because we don't, we're understaffed and we're trying to do a lot. I just have to do a lot of, for lack of a better word, grunt work.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have grunt work. I think that's what creates issue in my mind, right? When you bucket work under one definition and you say you work 10 hours a day, if the way that I define work is the hard, deep thought work. I mean, jumping on meetings and things like that, I don't even count those into my hours really in terms of I don't count them in my deep thought work hours. I stop the clock. Like if we have a call like this, like it's not running. This is just the extra stuff. And once I get the 3 hours done, I'm kind of done with my day, so to speak. I mean, I'll do other stuff, but it's like I've kind of accomplished the struggling work that I need to do.
Right.
And I think that's what causes problems, is because if you say you just work 10 hours and someone's doing deep thought work and someone's doing shallow thought work, it's much easier to do shallow thought work for 10 hours than it is to do deep thought work. So you have the person who's doing deep thought work trying to get to 10 hours, which I think is pretty much unattainable, right? Consistently. I mean, you can do it for a certain amount of time. And there are like these epic people, like Elon Musk potentially, and Bill Gates, I heard, used to do some like wild work binges and things like that. But I think that it's just like really just like hard to do consistently. And in my opinion, my technique, just to get down to like brass tacks of it, I am much more of like a very consistent worker. And I don't think consistency is given enough credit. I think that, that we've sort of romanticized this, like, you work 15 hours, you work 20 hours, and that's great. I mean, I've worked probably every single day minus like 20 in 6 years. Not a ton, right? But I am extremely, extremely consistent.
Yeah.
And if you want to take a week off, like, oh, you want to go to like the whatever, Mexico, gotta get a break. I gotta write my script. You've just lost, because like I'm just working every single one of those days, and they're so they're so efficient that it's also like I'm not taking the last 3 hours of my day and losing it, right?
Yeah.
I'm taking hour 0 to 3, or minute 0 to 3 hours, and that's the time I'm getting every single day. And so I don't think that's stressed enough the value of consistency in
Yeah,
work.
but for me, that's just situational context, right? Like certain types of work are going to require different kinds of thought, different kinds of work, the different situations. Jeff Bezos is famous for saying that he just wants to make 2 or 3 good decisions a day, and that's good enough for him. Naval Ravikant is famous for saying that he believes that for some companies, and I would say probably more stable companies, like he thinks of workers as athletes. You just need to kind of like do something really. You don't need to like work the whole time, but you just need to do something in spurts or something like that. But so it just, for me, it depends on what you have. But right now, if we are if we're in a new situation, we're under resourced, there's just a ton of stuff that needs to get done. You're just spending a lot of time that and frankly, I would rather not do. Like, I had to like do workers comp stuff. I had like insurance stuff yesterday. There's a bunch of crap I really, really wish I didn't have to do, but just got to do it. And that's I think I mentioned to you before the call, I had to stay up till 4 because I had a like 2 a.m. call with India, and then there's a couple other things I need to finish, and then with all the I missed my sleep cycle, and so I'm just like laying in bed, and then I'm kind of fucked up. But that's just, I mean, that's part of being part of a startup, in my opinion.
Yeah, see, I don't love that definition though. Like I feel like that mindset of like, yeah, but that's, like I guess I've sort of my whole life heard people say that and sort of been like, no, well, I
Well,
don't believe
so
it.
so let
Like I've heard
well
of the
here
like,
let me
you have to do this, I have to, well,
let
you
me
have to, and I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like,
but I'm
if
not
you,
so
if
Brett,
you
maybe.
push,
Okay,
let
go
me,
go
let
ahead,
me
go ahead.
finish
Okay,
is
okay,
like
yeah, sorry.
with your point, which is that, there's some work that you have to do. I kind of agree, but I think that if you really want to be successful, there is work that you certainly have to do, but I think that to create value as a business owner, you have to constantly be thinking of ways to solve problems more cheaply.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And your time is extremely expensive, and also your opportunity cost is extremely expensive. So if you're going to do something that's what we're calling shallow thought work, which I generally find to be less valuable work, then it's okay to do it. I mean, of course, you just got to get stuff done, right? Like as an entrepreneur, you just got to get things done. You got to email, whatever. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you need to be prioritizing. I need to figure out a way that I won't be doing this next year or next week or next month, right? Because
That's
if you start
yeah, yeah,
layering
yeah, yeah.
these things, it
So
becomes incredibly valuable for you
yeah,
because you as a business owner, JK, like the most valuable thing you can be doing is not that thing, right?
I 100% agree with that. So I wanted to clarify when I say I have to do it, I have to do it for now, but it's not like I'm not trying to retire that work. So for example,
Right.
I
But
used to
that's what I
spend.
think people do. I think that's people like kind of just they're lazy about thinking about solutions, and that's what frustrates me about work today is what creates great value is thinking of a creative way to solve a problem in the future that you aren't currently solving today.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, and this is we haven't really talked about this, people want to be working because they don't want to be home. They don't want to be home with their kids. They don't want to be doing the parenting thing. A lot of people don't want to be working, so they gravitate towards these fulfilling, shallow work things like email and Slack, which trigger fucking dopamine in your brain. Oh, I'm doing something. You know what? You have a complete control. It's quiet, and you're doing these things, and it's making you feel good. And instead of solving these problems and really looking at them, you're just kind of and I struggle with it too, right? It's just like I hold on to things where I'm like, dude, someone could do this for $20 an hour. Like you don't need to be doing this, right? So again, it's the implementation of it, but
Mhm.
I think you have to be really careful about just being like, well, I got to do these kind of things because you
Yeah.
do right now, but you got to do these kind of things, but you need to start solving. You need to like find another someone else is going to do them if you
Yeah.
really want to grow. You know what I
So
mean?
yeah. So unfortunately, I don't think we disagree on this point, but because like, but yeah. So the philosophy I have with my team is like, you have to attack every process in the company as well as your time, right? And so I used to spend 6 hours a day just doing recruiting. Now I spend less than 1 hour a day doing recruiting every day, right? Because we hired these two HR people. Now they have, and it's kind of weird because some people will like get a LinkedIn message from me, but it's not me. It's
Whoa,
one of my,
secrets
it's
out.
one of
Secrets
my,
out.
it's one of my HR guys, right? So it's like, anyway, I won't talk about
I
a
love
couple
that,
of
by the way.
awkward.
I love that technique. I love that technique. I think that, yeah, we can go about that
Yeah,
again, but
and
like,
I told you the other thing I just mentioned is like I've got a bunch of these producer tests that I need to grade that I'm like blocking, but that new person that I talked about, we're going over tests this week and next week, and so after next week he's going to be grading all the producer tests, and then I'm just going to see the finalists, right? And so yes, in my opinion, I have to do it for now, but then it's would be then how do I attack my time? How do I attack my schedule and eliminate stuff off my schedule so that I can move on to other things? Because yeah, I fucking hate it, dude. I hate doing legal, I hate doing accounting, I hate doing all that shit. And as soon as I can get it off my plate, I will.
yeah, and this is really just the difference between the time period of origin, right? Like I
Yeah.
said, I'm 6 years in, you're a
Right.
year in,
Yeah.
and if you were to graph out the number of these things that you just kind of have to do that just suck, that you just need to like get done as a owner, it's a ton in the beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like so much of your time is spent doing these like legal admin shit, man. It's like the hardest thing for me to finish, like because I'm not motivated by it at all. I'm not excited by it, and it just still takes that deep thought work for whatever reason. But you're right, like as you go, you have to be really disciplined about taking one of them and checking them off and taking another one, checking it off. Like
Right.
people, like I talk about my system and people are like, well, that's impossible for us. I'm like, dude, do you honestly think that I just sat down and did this all at once? Like, do you think I just like sat down and just operationalized my whole everything? It's like, no, I just list out the things, and then there are some things that you can really easily outsource, or like you
Yeah.
said, messaging on LinkedIn, like that's something that you could
Right.
get someone to do for ten
But
dollars an hour.
I
But
think
there are
you're
other things you can't, and you just got to kind of like start
yeah.
stacking those.
But I do think you're right that some people just want to feel like they're busy and like basically eat up their time. So and I won't name the company, but before I was at a certain
You
company
can name it. I mean, I don't.
and I was the only person at my level that did not use an admin. And people were like, "What is wrong with you? What are you doing?" They tried to force one on me. And for me it was like I want to know where I'm putting my time. I don't want someone, I'm not going to trust somebody else to book my time. So I save what, 5 minutes in booking my calendar, but I don't know what the fuck they put on my calendar. So I'm going to waste an hour in a meeting with something I don't know. So like, but people really didn't understand like, what is wrong with this guy? Why will he not use an admin? Because I want to know exactly, I'm going to control my time. People treat their time like it's just fucking, like it's just some kind of cheap commodity, but it's not. It's the most valuable thing you have. And I think people don't realize that. So yeah, if you were to take anything away, even aside, and this, we're kind of going off on a different topic now instead of work-life balance and work-life integration, but
Well,
in
I think
either
it's all
context,
connected. It's
yeah,
all connected.
in either context, people, one thing to take away is value your time and attack your fucking schedule. Look at what you can get rid of and get rid of it. The other thing I talked about before is basically zero-based budget. So like the other thing you can do with your schedule is write down every single item that like everything that you spend all your time on, hour with kids, even all your personal stuff, all the stuff you do for work, create slots in the amount of time, and then start with a zero schedule. Now, again, if you're a work-life balance, maybe you only have 40 hours. If you're a work-life integration, maybe you have 120 hours. Then slot that shit in until you run out. And then the stuff that doesn't make it, figure out how someone else is going to do it or it's taken care of in some other way, or start getting rid of stuff.
And I think this is very important to work-life balance. I mean, I think this is really kind of where the answer lies, because I feel like people are not able to get rid of shit. They hold on to everything. They have to fucking go to every meeting. They have to have, every single person in every meeting. They can't say no to meetings. They have to do that. It's an inability to prioritize, and also an inability to cut things, to just say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do these things. And I think there's a fear that if you don't go to that meeting, that you're somehow it's gonna hurt your career. Like that's the kind of like constant, or if I'm not online all the time. And I call bullshit on that because if you're creating value for your company, which I generally feel like is more in the deep thought work time period, no matter what position you are in, your job is going to be secure. In fact, I think it's becoming more secure. And because you don't want to be predicating your job security on FaceTime because it just ends up being, like you said, it's so costly. It becomes all of your time. And you want to predicate it on creating real value. And I'm the same way, Joseph. Like I'm like a borderline jerk. And that's a nice word for how I am with my time. Like if you email me like, hey, I'd love to just jump on a call, like you're gonna get like kind of a, like people will jump back like, whoa, what's wrong with this guy? Like he won't just meet with me. It's like, no, dude, like you don't understand. That's so expensive. That's so costly. You're going to interrupt me. You're going to change my thinking. You're going to stop me from doing it. And then it doesn't scale, right? Let's say you say yes to you. Now I'm saying yes to 10 other people, right? And it's not that I don't want to meet with people. It's just that you have to be so vigilant about what you invest in and and to do that you have to be almost more vigilant about what you don't do, and
Right.
what I see happening, because I've watched my wife and people around me struggle with this. They say yes to all those meetings, and then at the end of the day they're expected to still do the deep thought work, right? So now it's 5 o'clock and they're like, oh, I have to do that thing now because I'm done with all those meetings. And then they have to like struggle to get it done because they no longer have that strong brain power, and it's already 5 o'clock and they still have to do all those things. So yeah, I mean, I think that again goes back to this salary based system. And I'm not saying we have to get rid of salaries, but I'm just saying when you put a price on something as a fixed price on something like time, businesses aren't going to prioritize your time. They're just going to say, well, if this person's willing to work 100 hours, I might as well extort that. And that's kind of where a lot of this comes from, is they're paying you $100,000 and then they're going to work you until until you say you're not going to work. Um, yeah.
All right.
I mean,
Maybe we can end on one topic that's, I don't know, maybe controversial. Maybe we'll piss off a few people here, but I kind of call it the I don't know. It's from that Janet Jackson song, like "What have you done for me lately?" And because for me, I see this pretty common orientation from the work-life balance crowd about everything being tit for tat, everything being transactional. If I do this for you, what are you going to give me? What do I get? Right? And it's like in the way that it sometimes manifests, for example, and there was like I know Tabor had done that LinkedIn post about, should you do written tests, and then they were like, well, you better pay them if they're going to take your test. And it's like, and the moment I read something like that from somebody on LinkedIn, it's like, that's a work-life balance person. Because so so I think there is a, this kind of a mindset, in my opinion, and, please feel free to disagree with me, and I'm not hating on that philosophy. I think there are people where it's just like, yeah, pay me for my time. If I'm going to do anything, you better pay me. But I think that in my experience and based on my observation, it should really depend, right? This is why I think situational context is so important. So, and we can actually, maybe we can talk to Tabor about written tests and that whole philosophy at another time. But like if you're going to have that philosophy of like, in use of any of my time, you better pay me. It depends on who you are. Like, who are you? Like, I'm not going to pay somebody who's never done something before, but we're just trying to gauge potential, or but I would say that one thing I do notice is that the people with that kind of mindset, if I'm being honest, generally are not the best in the world, right? Because it's usually the best people are the ones who are like, oh, like I've had people who take my test and they're like, hey, can we jump on a call? I want to talk to you about it. I love taking it. I enjoyed it so much. And I'm like, great, right? And then but what we clearly saw is that there's also a specific mindset where it's just like, you want me to actually take a test to apply for your company and you're not going to pay me? Well, fuck you. It's just like, okay. you know, but usually it goes back to get to, have to, and do you have a passion for what you're doing, right? Because I think if you're passionate about your work, you wouldn't be viewing everything as a transactional thing. It's not like, what have you done for me lately? What are you going to give me? Everything for me must be accounted for and you must pay me for, right? So I think there's that aspect of it too. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a red flag in terms of the tactical of interviewing. But I think that what you're getting at is something that I've kind of transitioned to thinking in the last couple of years is if you're thinking of value creation in terms of hours, then you're really limiting what you can create in this world, right? I mean, because if I work, let's say 3 hours a day, and I work 3 hours on average day, deep thought work, right? Like I do work more hours in a day. That's my deep thought work, right? And the most hours I can probably work is like five x that, right? And so let's say I do increase that over time. That's great, but it's the cap is 5x, and it's at a massive cost, right? And I bring up this point, for example, with the family, like we are legally bound to our wives, right? Like we are married to them, we love them, and we have kids with them and all that stuff, but like legally we are basically in another business with another person in the state of California, right? So that's another like responsibility we have that we have to take time to do. So my point is that if you're just thinking of value creation by hour, then you're kind of not being creative or capping what you can really create in this world, right? Like Elon Musk created value by thinking of something beyond that. And I think that that's what's not great about this work-life balance thing is it's good to creatively think about solutions that actually solve problems without you using time. Because you're basically it's kind of like releasing a feature. I hate it when people come to me with an idea where they would release like they would be like, I have this great idea for how we can make money. We'll give them 20% more chips, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like you're basically just giving away free chips, right? Like that's not a good idea, right? Like a good idea is an idea where you're not giving away chips and they do something that we want them to do, like the players are engaged
Yeah.
or they're happier or whatever. And that's kind of what I think people who are really trading time for value are thinking, because time is incredibly expensive for you as an individual and for the business as well. So to just go, well, it's an hour and that's $100, like you're not being creative, right? You're not thinking of really like good solutions for problems, and you're going to get capped out at like the 12-hour mark. And so that's what I have an issue with it. But that said, I think in the short term, there are a lot of things that you have to just think
Yeah.
that way for. My definition of rich is that you have control over your time and you have control over the means of what you want to do,
Yeah.
which is money. And I
Right.
think too many people associate rich, and I mean rich as in like a good life, like a life that you want, not in like I have a Rolls Royce. Like
Yeah.
rich means like I have the life that I want, right? My definition of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And my definition of life is very different than other people. I'm not a I wear hoodie sweatshirts, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of a relatively simple person in the bubble that we live in. But but if you be rich, well, first of all, you need to know what that means for you. And
Yeah.
I think for some people, it means not spending time with their family. But if it is spending time with your family or spending time doing other things as well, for me, that's what rich is. And I think it is for a lot of other people. And I think too much emphasis is placed on rich being money. And that's why I think that you want to, but I think even in a business too, like you want to be able to reduce your hours because you can build more stuff, you know, like you
Yeah,
can.
and I get your point on like the concept of being rich. I think the point I was trying to make is that sometimes, and it's especially from the work-life balance crowd, they're always just thinking, not okay, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of them are thinking about what am I getting from this company? What do I get? What's me, 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 me? What do I get? What do I get? What do I get? And they don't realize, wait a minute, my manager is investing a lot of time trying to train me. My
I mean,
manager
I
is
guess.
looking out for me. The company is paying me a high salary and they're trying to give me all this stuff and spend time developing me. And they just, for some of these people, they just completely discount that, right?
Right, but Joseph, I think like I mean, I'm just gonna call you out a little bit here
Sure. Okay.
because I mean, I think you have these voices of these terrible people in your mind, right? Like you have a fairly cynical view of
I've heard them.
businesses and people, right? Yeah.
They're
Right. Like, I
not
mean, they come out,
fantasies.
right? Right. They
They're
come
actual
out,
people.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of anger towards these people or whatever, resentment or whatever word you want to throw at it, right? And I mean, I guess one is, I have those feelings, but like, how do you avoid it then, right? If it's terrible, then how do we avoid it? Two, like, why do we care about it? And three, then, like, what is the real thing going on here? Because those are probably people that, like there's something underneath, and we're all kind of struggling to deal with these people. And I think just, I don't know, like,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
you
I
want to
think
be
they,
careful about being so cynical about it. And I also think like
yeah.
you're just talking about these people that exist somewhere that are in shitty companies that we don't work for, which is like, okay, who
Yeah.
cares? I
Okay.
mean, I
Yeah,
guess like,
and right, and maybe I think the approach and the attitude should be more around like, look, I I think my main message would just be that there should be different kinds of companies and that we should all have respect for different kinds of companies and different kinds of approaches, different kinds of philosophies. And I personally think that so long as you're not trying to force one methodology or philosophy on other people, then that's the world that I think is best. Because I do think there are some people who, if you choose to want to like, yeah, maybe you don't need the $250,000 job or the job at, whatever, that makes a ton of money or ton of stock options or whatever. And if you're making, 80,000 working the hours that you want, you spend time with your family and you live an incredibly happy life. I mean, more power to you. That's great. But it's just that, not everybody wants to make that choice.
yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I think the thing that, I mean, I don't really mind that people waste time at work and do stupid shit at work too, because like it kind of
Yeah.
benefits me. I mean, unless it's my
Yeah.
subscribers, and that's one of the reasons why we don't do like a lot of this social media stuff that a lot of companies do, is because I don't want them
Yeah.
wasting their time. I want them working and making money and making better products.
Yeah.
I think that
And
that's what we're talking about is like,
right.
I think that there is a prevalent issue with how companies are interacting with their employees that's creating tension, and tension that isn't good, right? Tension that's bad, that's making the employees passive aggressive and pissed off to work. And that's not a good thing. That's not a
Yeah.
good thing for the individual. That's not a good thing for the business, right? So what is the solution to it? For me, it's an hourly pay system, right? And a system that you increase your pay based on how much time you want to work. You can work three weeks out of a month or 4 weeks out of a month. You can work these hours or those hours. When you work something that's of more value to the company, you get paid more. If you work on the weekends, you get paid for that time. We also leverage non-financial benefits, right? Like working wherever you want, working whenever you want, having autonomy,
Yeah.
having not having to travel to work, right?
Yeah.
So what are the solutions for companies? And I think solving this problem is a big fucking problem for a lot of companies. It's very, very prevalent. So like what do they do about it?
Okay, everybody. that is that is it for us on work-life balance versus work-life integration. Hopefully you guys have learned a thing or two, or maybe you completely disagree. If you disagree, leave a comment, get in touch with us, let us know. And if there are other topics that you want us to talk about, let us know. And I think we might be having some guests in the future. So if you're interested in talking about a topic that would be interesting and want a guest host with us, let us know for that as well. I think that's it, Brett.
Awesome, man. I love the Philosophy Fridays. This is
Gives us a lot to think about.
it
All right,
does.
everybody. Catch you next time. Bye.